happiest day in the life of a business is not when you figure out who you are, but rather it's when you figure out what you're not. Because the moment you know what you're not, you stop saying yes to those that you shouldn't have said yes to.
Sheridan, the author of They Ask, You Answer. He's listed as one of the 20 speakers you don't want to miss.
4 simple pillars of disruption. Talk about, show, sell, be more human. You do those things right there, that's disruption 101. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then, like Elon and so many others have done, you win.
Sheridan is going to blow your mind here on the Big Success Podcast. All right, buddy, let's chat disruption. People talk about it. How do you view disruption in business today?
Yeah, few do it. I think it's essential, especially because one of the big challenges today is to become known. And getting known is getting harder because for the last 25 years, the easiest way to get known was through Google and search. And you can't build your house on Google today like you did for 25 years. And you've gotta do more, and you've gotta be more. And the thing about disruption is a lot of people know they should do it, but inherently they don't know how. So let me just give you some like very clear ways that you can absolutely disrupt. Number one, you gotta be willing to talk about or say what others in your space aren't willing to say. And think about all the messaging that you do as a company. How much of that messaging is pretty much everybody else also saying in your space versus how much of it is everyone saying, wow, I can't believe they said that, okay? That's disruption, that's number one. Number two, you gotta be willing to show what others aren't willing to show, specifically through video, because that's when you can really break out the secret sauce. A lot of companies think they got secret sauce when in reality, all they've got is Thousand Island dressing and everybody knows it, right? And so if they just let go of this idea that we have a secret sauce and they show it, now we've got magic. That's disruption when most people won't show the thing. Number three, are you selling in a way that nobody is willing to sell in your space? Lots of different examples of that. And then number four, are you being more human in the way you present yourself than anyone in your space? 4 simple pillars of disruption. Talk about or say, show, sell, be more human. You do those things right there, that's disruption 101. Most aren't willing to do it.
Yeah. I want to talk about 3 and 4. Okay. Once someone taught me the definition of disruption was being able to, or the way to do disruption was sell it for less and make more profit. You know, like the Apple, they went from selling a full album to a single song, but they made more profit.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah.
Let's dive into the thought of number 4, being more human out there in the marketplace. It's kind of scary to do that sort of thing.
You have to put yourself out there. The problem is, what we know now is that as the impact of Google goes down, it means things like the importance of YouTube go up, social media goes up, which is why, we're busy doing this. I mean, right now, you're being more human, you and I, than a lot of people necessarily in our space. You're putting ourselves out there, we're taking the time to do it, we're making a potential connection with the audience. The whole idea is that they feel like they know us, yet we've never met them before. That's an example of being more human. The problem that brands have, though, is tell me one brand that just gets you really jazzed up when it comes to social media. Most people can't name one because there's very few. But if I said to you, how many people that own brands do you follow? Yeah. Oh yeah, I follow Elon Musk. Oh yeah, I follow Tim Cook. It's like these people, they have millions of more followers than their massive company that everybody uses. Why is this? Because people are attracted to people. And because we're attracted to people, we're drawn to that. So you have all these companies that have all these, like, let's say social media pages, but it's a company page, and they're wondering, why has it got no legs? It got no legs because it really isn't a human behind the brand.
And Elon is a number one example of saying things that no one else is willing to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's the ultimate disruptor. But if you look at, he's always been a disruptor because he takes things that are happening in the industry and he says, well, why could we not do that? So, for example, he was the first in the automotive space to say, we're going to go direct to consumer, right? And when he did that, and there's a pattern that happens after disruption. It's a classic phrase, you've probably heard it before. So when you disrupt, what happens at first, everyone ignores you. They don't pay attention. But once they notice you, they laugh at you. So that's the second thing, they laugh at you. After they're done laughing at you, what happens in the process of them laughing at you, they start to look around and say, oh my goodness, the market is responding and the market likes what this person has just done or what they've suggested or how they're doing their business. And so after they've ignored you and then after they've laughed at you, now they fight you. And this is what's happened with every major industry where it's been flipped on its head. There's always this period of fight, push back. Uber, every taxi company in every jurisdiction fought back. Airbnb, everybody in the hospitality space was fighting back. But at first they were ignored, then they were laughed at, and then they were fought. All the automotive manufacturers fought Elon on this. But you know what's interesting is the marketplace always wins. Eventually, the marketplace wins. And then finally, let's just repeat what we said, okay? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then, like Elon and so many others have done, you win. You win. And that's the pattern. Most people aren't willing to step up to that plate though, Brad, because you're right. It means that if your brand wants to really stand out today, you have to be willing for people to not agree with you or to call you out or to say, you look silly on camera, or I don't like that guy, or whatever it is. And so you can say to yourself, am I more concerned with putting off a few people, or am I more concerned with building a known, trusted brand with my ideal buyer? And me, I always am going to choose, I want to be known and I want to be trusted, and I'm going to let go of those that are not a good fit, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one of being okay with some people not wanting to do business with you.
Hard for a lot of people to do. Happiest day in the life of a business is not when you figure out who you are, and I think you very much know this, but rather it's when you figure out what you're not. Because the moment you know what you're not, you stop saying yes to those that you shouldn't have said yes to. Everybody that started a company, and you've done this, I've done this, early on when we're just desperate to get going and we need the cash, we say yes to a lot of things that are really outside of our zone of genius, outside of our scope, and because of that, we end up waking up in the morning and hating the thing and like, whoa, why did I take that money, right? And so when you really know, I am not that, I say no to that, then you are such a happier entrepreneur and business owner because you're staying in that zone of genius or that strength area, and that's a beautiful place to be.
And it's replicatable, and you know your price point, and you can charge more for it, and all those wonderful aspects of a great business. So number 3 of selling in a way others aren't willing to sell. I live here in Vegas. Zappos is a perfect example of just changing the way people buy things. How can other businesses learn from that? What can they do? How can they change it up?
Well, you know, if you think about selling, there's always friction points in every sales process. And so what you want to do is you want to look at your entire sales process, or really what is a buyer's journey, right? Especially because they're in control these days. And you say, well, what's every point in this journey where they could get frustrated? It could get slowed down. So let me give you a perfect example. If you talk to any buyer consumer in the world and you said to them, would you prefer that a company would be willing to put a pricing estimator on their website so that you could at least get a price range? Especially if you input some variables and you said, okay, here's what I'm looking for, and then you got an estimate. Would you prefer that or prefer just to reach out and talk to a salesperson? 100% of people are going to say, I'd rather do a pricing estimator first. Now, if you look at almost 100% of businesses, especially let's say B2B service-based businesses or whatever you want to call yourself, how many of those folks have a pricing estimator on your website? You don't have one. And you don't have one because you're making all these reasons as to why. I have a company I started, it's basically it's called Price Guide. And it's the simplest tool on the internet right now for you to immediately build within 30 minutes, have a working pricing estimator on your website. So I've got all this data now for people that have implemented this tool on their website. And what we see over and over again is that if you put a pricing estimator tool on your website, again, you're not giving the exact price, you're giving a price range, okay? It's very safe, it's very helpful to the person, and they're inputting the variables. They're saying, yes, I want this, no, I don't want that. Okay, so it's almost like you're building their price. What's crazy is we see a 3 to 5x every time on lead flow, SQLs, every single time. Yet most won't do it because they'll make up reasons as to why you can't do it. I talked to an insurance company recently, like, man, I don't think I could ever have a pricing estimator. I said, really interesting. So tell me, if I asked you right now, could you give me a sense for what my rate would be? Could you do that? He said, well, I had to ask you some questions. I said, what are those questions? He repeated 5 questions. I said, those are the questions on your pricing estimator. Now go. That's it.
Yeah.
But we overcomplicate this stuff. That's one of the easiest ways to sell in ways that others don't sell. This brings me to a bigger point, which is in the market today, there's a stat, a trend Gartner came out with that said 75% of all buyers say they would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. Now, what does this mean? Well, I don't think it means we hate salespeople. It just means that we don't want to talk to a salesperson until we are good and ready. And so, if a company looks at that trend, they got two choices. You can say, I hate the way we're headed into the future. There's going to be no salespeople. Or you can say, is it possible to embrace this trend? Is it possible to benefit from this seller-free economy? 100% possible. And the way you do this is through self-service. Self-service tools that traditionally would have made a prospect talk to a human. What can you do today to allow someone to not be forced to talk to a human first? To eliminate the friction point. Let me give you another killer example. This is a test that I've been doing with a bunch of clients, and now I've been talking about it in business. They're like, dude, that's crazy. Did you know that if you allow a prospect to choose the salesperson they're working with, closing rates double every single time? So let me give you an example.
So on the website, I can pick from
Yes.
Bob, Mary.
Yes. So, and I've done this now with multiple companies. It's wild. So let me give you an example. I've got a financial advisor that's in New Zealand. And what he's done, I said, this is going to work. He said, let's give it a try. And so he has all of his financial advisors on one page. He has their image, he has their bio, etc. And so you have options. You can choose to be given whoever they decide. Okay, so you can choose no one, or you can choose your advisor. As soon as they implemented that, the closing rates went doubled, boom, just like that. I've got a retailer in Boston, Massachusetts. He's got a self-scheduling, self-selection tool on his website. You can schedule when you come into the store, and you schedule who you talk to. So you're scheduling your salesperson. Here's what's wild. Because he's such a data freak like me, he found that the average sale was literally double in terms of if you just came into the showroom and they gave you a salesperson, or if you called and said, hey, I want to come into the showroom, and once again, they gave you a salesperson, versus if you set the salesperson yourself, double the amount across the board, an extraordinary number. In every business almost, there is the ability to customize, but most have never thought about it before because it's just next person up in the queue.
Yeah.
All right? That's how you sell as no one has ever sold before.
Yeah, it's crazy the way that the world shifts, and the product doesn't have to shift, the way you deliver doesn't have to shift, but we noticed when I wrote the book, Pulling Profits Out of a Hat, that a scaling business, one of the fundamentals to it is removal of salespeople from the sales process.
Perfectly fine, yes.
Now, one of the things that you and I have discussed, and I learned a lot of this from you, is we've literally created videos that answer not every single customer question, but dang, probably 90% of them, sort of thing.
Yeah, like our goal has to be 3 words: remove all doubt. That's what great companies, great marketers, great salespeople do. Remove all doubt. And you don't wait for the doubt to manifest. You get in front of the doubt. Just look at the estimator tool. The number one question people have when it comes to pricing isn't really like, what's the exact price? They really just want to know, am I even in the game?
Yeah.
Is it even possible for me to consider this thing, whatever this thing is? We just assume that everybody knows. And so as soon as they're able to do that, they're able to say, well, now I understand. That's when you remove all doubt. And as you eliminate friction, it leads to dramatically more trust. But if there's any doubt, then suddenly, let me give you the silliest example of doubt in the history of the world. You ever been on a shopping cart page where you're getting ready to buy something online? You have your credit card out, but then on that page, there's a little coupon code. You ever seen that? In that moment, as soon as you see the coupon code and you don't have the coupon code, something crazy happens. And what happens for over 50% of all people is suddenly they start looking for the coupon code.
Yeah.
And here's what gets really crazy. The majority of those people, if they can't find the code, guess what happens?
They don't buy.
They don't buy. And it's because the second they put that little coupon code there and the person didn't have it, they planted a seed of doubt.
Yeah, I know from my own personal experience that I'll then hit the Capital One thing and it'll go and find me 10 coupon codes and run them all through.
Right.
Then it says, you've got the best price. Okay, I've removed all doubt because I use an outside supplier to tell me
And
I
here's
have
what's
the right
ridiculous. You could afford any of those
Yeah.
things. And a second ago, you had your credit card out.
The other thing I do is I wait for 3 days. Because I know in the next 3 days, they're going to send me an email with a 20% off coupon to get me hooked into this dang
Remove
thing.
all doubt.
It's
That's
like-
why
it's
coupon codes hurt conversion rates. Anything that induces friction in the buying process.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to innovate. And to your point, we think innovation means that I have to change my product or my service. No, usually the highest rate of innovation occurs within sales and marketing. And if you find those opportunities, you can completely change the game. And if you look at so many of these industries that have just blown up, it's because they changed something about the sales process. Amazon invented nothing. They've invented nothing, but they changed that buyer's journey. And because of that, they're an incredibly innovative company.
Yeah. So I want to touch on 2 things then. First, when someone wants to get 70% of the way through the sale, 80% of the way through the sale themselves, what are the top 3 or 4 things someone can do to help a customer get through the buyer's journey without talking to someone?
Yeah, so we know with every single, and to your point, the average buyer is 80% through the buyer's journey before they reach out to a company, which means you as a business, you better win that 80%. Otherwise, they're not coming to you. And so what do they want to know? Well, there's 5 fundamental things that every buyer researches. We've seen this over and over again. The data is empirical. And in fact, if I said to you or anybody that's listening to this right now, what is one thing that you always research before you reach out to a company? Most people would say price. Most people would say reviews. Okay, so those are 2 of these, what I call in my book, They Ask You Answer, the big 5. Okay, there's 3 more. So you've got cost. The second one is what we just call problems. Problems really means fears, issues, concerns, worries. And here's what's really interesting, Brad. When we get serious about buying something, we stop thinking about all the benefits and we start saying, what could go wrong? That's the fear. How could this blow up in my face? And so a lot of companies are really afraid to address that because there is some type of drawback or drawbacks to pretty much every product and service in the world. Now, if you ignore those, you're not going to be very successful. But if you lean into them, you can actually turn them to your advantage, openly discussing them. But again, the greatest way in life to resolve a concern is to address it before it becomes a concern. So you're removing the doubt before it gets there. So that's problems number 2. So you got cost, you got problems. Number 3 is comparisons. We love to compare online. You love to compare online. We all compare online. Most companies don't want to compare online because they don't want to talk about the other option. That's assuming that the person's ignorant. They're not dumb because they have this thing called the internet and they have this thing called ChatGPT and they can get the dang answer. And the moment you start to approach your buyer as an intelligent human being that has all these incredible tools at their fingertips, maybe, just maybe, you'll say, you know, it's more important that they learn from me than that they get this information from somebody else, because it is just not acceptable in my book as an entrepreneur and as a business owner that somebody would get their answers from someone else. I know it's going to happen with AI, but even AI, I want AI learning from me as well. So that's the 3rd one, comparisons. The 4th one is reviews. The thing about reviews, Brad, is people don't just want the good reviews, they want the good, the bad, and the ugly. In fact, after you've seen a good couple of reviews, you always go to the 1 stars because you want to see how the stuff hit the fan and what went wrong. And so you've got to be, as a company, you've got to talk about both sides of the coin. And then finally, the 5th one that you always research before you reach out to a company is best. Best, most, top. Think about how many times you've gone online, you search best plus another phrase. Prolific. Those are the big 5. Cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, best. And what's wild is they run the economy of search. This is what people want to know. Businesses don't want to talk about them, and this is why they lose the 80% and they don't win the trust and they don't become known because they're not willing to say what others in their space aren't willing to say, and they say, well, I'm going to wait until they ask me in the sales process, and by that point, you've lost the majority, and that's how you lose.
The interesting one about the reviews, one of our restaurants, we get customers at least 2, 3 a week that come in and say, I came in for the way you handle the 1-star reviews, like how you write back to them, all that sort of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Next thing I want to touch on, reducing friction by making smaller steps. Like for us in our franchise business, we allow someone to just fill in a 5 tick box form rather than a questionnaire or a big survey, a full application. We start them with smaller steps. What are you seeing in that trend of making it smaller?
Yeah. So everybody's really funny about time, and they've been burned multiple times online. And so let me give you an example of a really classic one. Filling out forms online. People are afraid to fill out forms. All of us are. And when I say afraid, I mean there's certain like doubts, worries, concerns. Again, we got to remove all doubt. So there's 4 major fears that people have when they're filling out a form online. Number 1 is, are you going to call me to death? Number 2, are you going to spam me to death? Number 3 is, what are you going to do with my information? And number 4 is, so if I fill out this form, what's going to happen exactly? Okay, so those are the 4 major fears. So let me give you an example of how you can overcome that very easily. You can put a video next to the form that's on that get a quote or contact us page or whatever that is for you. And that video has a title above it that says, see exactly what's going to happen if you fill out this form. So that's the title of the video, you put it on the page. And then in the video, you literally explain to them, hey, I know you're sitting there right now and you're debating, should I fill out this form? What are you going to do with my information? Well, we're going to explain that to you right now. And what we've seen is if people do this, they get on average an 80% or more lift of people that will fill out their forms simply because they address this. But that's a very little thing. But what you're focused in on is, once again, it's like friction, doubt, fear. How do we remove these things from the process? You've got to become obsessed with it as a business owner. The business owners that are not innovative when it comes to sales and marketing, they just don't think like their buyer. But the ones that do, they are doing extraordinary things when it comes to innovation. Just really, really tapped into exactly what they would want. And the one thing too I would say about this is, people say like, how do you keep up with marketing trends and just general sales trends? The easiest way to do this is to become very self-aware. How are you changing online? Are you starting to use AI? When you search something, how do you search? What are the words that you use? What makes you click on something? What makes you watch something? What are the signals that are moving you to action? Most people just like without even thinking about it, they move through their day, digitally speaking, and they never question, why did I do that? But if you question why you did what you did, and why'd you take that action, suddenly you can say, son of a gun, we're not doing that as an organization. And you can really start to get innovative that way.
Yeah. I feel like watching, I watch my kids and how they buy things or want to buy things. Helps me buy good shares as well. But in going to this, you've mentioned AI a few times. Obviously, AI is changing Google's response and the algorithm shifted. AI has rewritten Google's algorithm. Like they've never done 3 algorithm releases in a short period. And now we have 3 algorithm releases. How is AI, first of all, going to impact the search, that whole side of marketing?
You cannot build your house on Google any longer. And, frankly, like with my swimming pool company back in the day, we had the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world, and we still probably do, but I couldn't do that if I was starting the business today and think I'm going to reach such extraordinary heights. You got to do more. And so the pendulum is swinging. You have to put less weight on Google search to carry you, and even potentially Google ads. Because what I know is that Google is a platform. And if there's one thing that's certain about platforms, is platforms come and then they go. That's how it works. So it's not a forever thing. We had it for a couple of decades, but in 4 or 5 years, you're gonna be like, where did it all go? And we're already seeing a lot right now. If you think about the goal for Google since day one, and now the goal for these AI platforms is the platform, want to give to the customer the best, most specific, relevant answer to their question, to their query, as quickly as possible. And so if you continue on that trend, it allows you to see, okay, is the way Google works today, is that going to be the best, most specific, relevant answer as quickly as possible? No, it's not. No, it's not. And so it's not a long-term viable business model. Doesn't mean it wasn't great. It just means it's not the future. And the companies that accept this are going to be much more successful. And so you have to say, all right, I today am in a battle of signals to 2 parties. The first party is to my buyer, to my consumer. I need to send enough signals and I need to be on enough platforms to where they find me. The average buyer, HubSpot has said this, needs 5 to 7 touches or signals with your organization. So maybe they saw you on this short that we're doing right now, or maybe they saw you on a long form video, maybe they saw you on a podcast, whatever the thing was. These are all different signals. And so you've got to make sure that you're sending out enough signals to the marketplace. But there's another major group where you have to send signals, and that's AI. Because when AI really started to come out, and it's been out for a long time, but in terms of in earnest, November 2022, we used it mainly as a creation tool. But now it's becoming, faster even than I thought, a recommendation tool. That's when it really starts to hurt your traffic. And that's when you're not getting as much recommendation from something like Google, and you're getting more recommendation from AI. So AI is determining your destiny. So what does that mean? You have to send enough signals to AI that says, this is a company worthy of recommending. And what we've seen time and time again already, because so many of the companies I work with have been following They Ask You Answer, like you, producing content, producing the video, producing that podcast, answering all these questions. Those are all signals to AI that says, that's a company that is out there. That's a company that's teaching the world. That's a company that even AI, am learning from, and that's a company that I'm going to recommend. Companies with prolific content strategies get recommended much more than companies by AI than companies that do not.
Yeah. Even when you talk about training AI, one of the things we've been very clear on is asking, especially ChatGPT, as it's sort of the number one right now, but also Google, asking it questions that people are going to be asking. A simple example for us, going into ChatGPT and asking, why is ActionCOACH the world's number one business coaching firm? And so it makes the AI say what you want it to learn type thing. Why is Brad Sugars the number one business coach in the world? And they seem stupid to do it, but you've got to do it type thing. You've got to spend some time helping the AI learn who you are, what you do, and how you do it. And the only way it does that is by asking it questions type thing. And that's where I think people don't put a lot of thought into the questions of that AI is learning every time you ask it a question. Like I was playing with it the other day and writing some questionnaires and surveys. I said to ChatGPT, hey, take Brad Sugars' 5 ways to multiply your business formula. And it came back, I said, hang on, that's not Brad Sugars' formula. Brad Sugars' formula is this, 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 and this. And it doesn't say thank you for teaching me, but essentially it's learning what we do. And so it's important for us to all make sure that we teach those platforms about us. And again, the content, the articles, the blogs, all of that sort of stuff helps it learn because it crawls all that stuff. It's an accumulation of the knowledge base out there.
You have to assume that every single piece of content online, it's going to be sucked into that vortex that is AI. And so therefore, if you haven't created the signals, the food for it to consume, you're just not going to be the beneficiary of its recommendations.
Well, hey there, and thanks for listening. I've noticed that 78% of you are brand new, which means you haven't hit the subscribe button yet. By subscribing, you help us bring on even better guests, better quality content, and serve you better with even more podcasts. So please hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. It makes a huge difference. If you support us, we're going to support your success and help you achieve big success together.
Marketing, sales, customer experience, communication is like the central hub of all of that. Technology platforms, all these things. Is communication changing? Is it staying more the same? How is communication today relative to getting the result we want in business?
Well, I think communication, to your point, is literally the core of every interaction in society. It starts and it stops there. What's interesting about communication as a whole is that we are becoming less and less effective as communicators. Now, why is this? Well, there's a lot of reasons. The easy one that people immediately think about is we're spending a lot more time having these simple, like textual back and forth, but we're not having deep conversations. So the art of deep conversation is less and less a part of society today, which is pretty sad. Also, people tend to be a lot more distracted because of that. Now, the other, just like component to this is if we look at the way communication was before, let's say with sales teams, compared to today, sales teams are a train wreck. Why? Over 90% of the sales teams that I meet with, and I meet with a lot, do not have more than one training a year where they do role plays. One a year at most, which, as you know, Brad Sugars, is a recipe for disaster, because what does that lead to? It leads to you practicing on your customers and not practicing on yourself.
Imagine a football team that did no training.
Crazy.
They never went to practice. They just played games on a Sunday.
Yeah, or they just talked about, and what we're doing, and it's a very good analogy. It's almost like what we're doing is we're sitting around and we're talking about the team we're going to play, but we're not practicing on the field.
Yeah.
And so what do you see sales teams doing? Looking at pipeline. And they're really great at playing with the CRM and looking at the pipeline and talking about, okay, what deals we got coming up. But what they're not good at is learning how to communicate in such a way that you make a connection with that deal, and it leads to them wanting to do business with you because they trust you more than anyone else they've talked to. And so we've got an incredible dearth of sales training today. Most sales kickoffs I see, and I do a lot myself, are ineffective. They're once a year, and we've lost it. And one of the reasons why we've lost this edge as a society is because managers don't want to put themselves in the line of fire and receive the feedback themselves in front of their team. And so because we're more thin-skinned, less ready to receive feedback as a gift, then we don't want to fail in front of our team. And so because of that, or we don't want to show our team how to do it the right way, again, there's this fear of failure within organizations everywhere. And really, it starts with leadership. It starts from the top. If the CEO, if the leadership team, if they're willing to fail, and they're willing to screw up, and they're willing to show their team, hey, I'm imperfect too, and here's how I messed up, now you create this trickle-down effect where everybody's like, okay, so in other words, we can fail forward, we're going to celebrate our failures, and we're going to work with this. But instead, you just don't see it. And so this is why we've seen that sales training as a whole is dead. Very sad. There's a very small percentage that are doing this. All you have to do, if you want to know the culture of a sales team, the true culture of a sales team, I ask one question: how often do you do sales role play trainings? And if they don't say at a minimum once a month, and they should be saying once a week, but if they don't say at a minimum once a month, I know that they're grossly underperforming.
Yeah, I'm pretty keen on my teams doing daily role play. I mean, it's 10 minutes, but it's the one thing. It's
Sharpen the saw.
Just
sharpen the saw.
Every single day, do something. So that fear of failure in business, I guess, Mark, I do enjoy the fact that there's a fear of failure in business, because otherwise people wouldn't turn to business coaches. It's like,
true, right? But even with the business coach, it's great to hear them say, hey, I blew this too, but here's what we learned. I mean, if you look just across the board, you talk to most managers and you say, have you been specifically trained on how to give a perfect, an effective, a powerful, a life-changing one-on-one? Most will say, no, I was just thrown into the fire.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy, but this is what we see. And so we're not training people how to communicate. How much communication training did you have in school? You didn't have any. You had none. Yet this is the most important thing we do in society. So, now as I go around and, I'd say 75% of the time I'm teaching sales and marketing, 25% of the time I'm teaching some type of leadership or sales communication. But the through line to all of it is how do you communicate in such a way so as to build more trust and connect deeper with your audience. This is what we're trying to do. It's what we're trying to do in marketing at scale. We're trying to do that in sales on a one-to-one. We're trying to do that in leadership, again, one-to-team. That's what we're trying to do. We've got to connect.
Yeah, and the salesperson today is no longer a product-focused peddler. Back in the day, the salesperson, and when I bought a car as a young man, you went to 10 dealerships and you got the brochures and they told you what the product was. There was no real sales skills. It was a information parting person. Today, the salesperson comes in at 70% through the sales process. Again, depends on the age of the person.
Sure.
The older they are, the more chance they'll connect early. Younger they are, the less chance they'll ever connect. The salesperson's job is very different now. It's that last 20%. It's the objections and all of these things. How do we teach salespeople to be that different person today?
Well, the key is to teach them how to ask better questions. And it sounds simple, but most have not been taught. What makes an effective question? What makes the perfect question? It is an art, and you can learn it. We just talked with your group. There's clear signals. We call it the 3 Ps of a perfect question. If you ask a great question, the person feels like there's progress being made, right? If they don't feel like there's progress being made, they'll say things like, where is this question going? Where are you going with this? Yeah. Because they're not feeling like we're moving forward. Hey, I've already told you the answer. They don't feel like we're moving forward. If they don't feel like there's a purpose, so like, what do you mean by that? If they don't feel like there's a purpose to the question, okay? If they don't feel like there's a path. Now, a path, and they don't say in their mind there's no path, but a path, when a question lacks path, the person gets confused. And they say, I'm not sure how to answer that. I'm confused. Like, what do you want me to say here, right? That means there's a lack of path. And so you have to teach progress, purpose, path, and how to know when the question really consisted of those three things versus when it didn't. The other thing about it is, we tell salespeople all the time, if you don't consistently hear your prospects say, no one has ever asked me that question before, you're not doing the job you should be doing. You should be asking questions that they have never heard from other vendors, from other salespeople. But in order to do that, it's not the first question. It's always the follow-ups, and there's depth and depth and depth. And so what we want to achieve, we want to get to a place where the prospect is literally saying to themselves, I had no idea I felt that way. That's powerful, Brad, because it means they just had a breakthrough. They just learned something about themselves because you are so good at discovery, you're so effective at questions that literally you're just stimulating these new paths inside of them that they were able to walk down and find something that they had never discovered before. That's really powerful. The great ones induce self-discovery.
Yeah. One of my greatest ever sales teachers, trainers, coaches told me, you can never sell anything, but you can ask people questions to let them sell themselves, sort of thing. And just when they find it for themselves. And I think when I'm talking sales with people, I'm sitting there saying, think of it as a coach. You're not giving them the answer, you're questioning, and usually you teach it's got to be at least 3 questions. I know in coaching we say it's going to be 5 to 8 questions before they get to the answer. To do things. Sales, it can be a little less. So, Marcus Sheridan, best-selling author, doing all the things, traveling the world teaching. What's one thing you need to learn from Brad Sugars? What's the final question of the day?
I think one thing that you are really good at is selling businesses, building and selling. And I'm entering the phase of my career where I've gone through 1 exit. I see 3 in the future. Because, like you, I've got multiple companies now. And there's a lot to learn about that because you just can't prepare for that very well because it's one of those things that nobody teaches you how to do this unless you find the right mentors that have gone through it. And not a lot of people have sold a business. I mean, yes, in the scale of the world, yes, but how many friends do I have that I know that have sold a business in my hometown? 0. I don't know a single one in my hometown. So I have to come and meet with people like you, like we're going to have a dinner tonight, and that's when I'm going to be picking your brain about how to exit the right way and not screw it up.
Marcus, buying a business, almost no one's ever done. Selling a business, almost no one's ever done. But even to your subject, building a website, almost no one's ever done it. They don't know how to do it.
That's right.
They go and find someone that can build a website, and usually it's someone priced at like $5,000, and they wonder why it didn't work, and that sort of thing. It's a professional thing, and I think probably the ultimate answer to any question around getting results is find a professional. Find someone who does this for a living. It's like,
Don't reinvent the freaking wheel.
yeah, we talk about it in our marketing teams, and it's like, if it moves too fast, we need an agency. We can do referrals all day long. You know why? Because referrals hasn't really changed a lot in the last 50, 20 years type thing. Can we do SEO? No. You know why not? It changes every week. We go and find a professional SEO company that has 1,000 SEO customers. If they mess it up, they're losing 1,000 customers.
Yeah.
They got to keep up with the best of the best and all that sort of stuff. So,
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.